Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Loreweek. All the lore to fill your week. I'm your host, the Lore Runner, someone who will later be known as the PG-13 Runner. Trying out a slightly different setup today, mostly just experimenting. Something I've been wanting to do for a while now, and kind of debating the validity or reality of doing so, just kind of not sure what I think of it yet. So feel free to give feedback, as ever. And if you don't, then I will find you. I will find you. And I will destroy you. Oh, never mind. Don't know, got confused with another old man there for a second. Hope everything's going well for everyone. If it's not, then that sucks, but there's not a lot I can do about that, unfortunately. If I could, I would do something about it. So, quick notes here. I have found, for those of you who care about World of Warcraft, I have found, from an insider source, I have found a leak about the new expansion, about what's going to happen. I thought I'd share it with you guys. You know, grain of salt and all that, usual, but I thought this is cool enough that it'd be worth sharing. So, without further ado, behold! World of Warcraft Team Racing! As you can see here, we've got the Horde, represented by Vol'jin, the Alliance, represented by Anduin. We've got Evil, represented by Deathwing. The Scourge, naturally, represented by the second Lich King, which is strange. And, naturally, Illidan, represented by Illidan. Personally, I'm kind of excited about this expansion. I've been wanting some kind of Mario Kart, you know, cartoony, bonkers-style racing game in World of Warcraft for a long time. Anyone remember that old Warcraft 3 map that was literally a kart racing game? I remember that map. That was actually really fun. And it looks like they're finally going to start doing this same thing for World of Warcraft. So that's really cool. I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's going to be cool. Of course, some people are upset that this violates lore because Vol'jin's back and Progue is here. Hi, Progue. Fear. Thank you, as ever, very much, Progue, for those Twitch Prime subs. Those are still, ever, and always useful. I had something else to share during my intro thing. Where's my frickin' notes? Did I? Hang on. Was there something else for the intro? Maybe not, actually, now that I'm looking at it. No, I suppose not. I don't have anything else to share, so I'm just going to sit here for a bit. Oh, this is boring. Obviously I'm going to be turning back into the PG-13 runner after Loreweek today, as we're going to go through more South Park. And, I really wish I had more time to stream. There's so many games I want to stream. I want to finish the EU4 stream. Some of you probably don't even remember that. I'd love to stream like 4, I think, now. Different games on the Switch, which I'm looking forward to streaming. Gosh, what else? There's, of course, the big Pokemon X and Y stream, which we still need to do. And the Super Metroid Chill Run. I don't know why I called it that. The Metroid Chill Run, going through the Metroid series, finishing A2MR, etc. Or AM2R. I always get that confused. I don't know what you're talking about, Max Time. I didn't stream that all day yesterday. Yes, the Ottomans must conquer all. I want to rule on high in this castle as Sultan. Is that so much to ask? Yes, Mario Odyssey is going to be soon. I mean, my schedule is absolutely crammed. And if you're wondering what my schedule is, I have a website. Did you know I have a website? It's called The Website to End All Websites. It's actually a really stupid, terrible website. I'm still working on that Lorium's page, by the way. Music's a little bad. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the music off. I was just having that for, like, an intro thing. This should be a better volume. So yeah, I'm going to, I have the schedule already kind of lined up. There's a couple of games not on there that will eventually be on there. These include Total War, Warhammer 2, and Yakuza 0, and Pokemon, and the Switch games, and the Metroid showruns, and starting the in-depth classic series. Jesus Christ, I have so much stuff to stream, it's actually kind of ridiculous. Guys, I've decided to quit the YouTube side of things. Anyways, no, I'm kidding. Okay, so let's get to actual news, shall we? Let's do this. Oh yeah, by the way, it is now, let's see, little under 2 weeks until we get there. What did I say last week, Mike Romano? Or are you talking to someone else? Anyways, let's get to actual news. This is gonna suck. Don't worry, Psychotic. I'm sure the hurricane won't hurt you. Let's start with the heavy thing. Let's just do this. I don't actually want to talk about this. This is such a thing that I was tempted to leave this. It's a joke, Micromon. It's like I've been saying that for like a year now. This is such a irritating topic that I actually thought about saving this topic till Halloween, which is also not that long from now. Looks like 2 weeks and 2 days. Anyways, so let's talk about the ESRB and gambling, shall we? All right, so let's start with the thing that, of course not, Coolwalker. Let's start with the thing that really precipitated this discussion. And that would be the fact that the ESRB has recently declined to classify gacha-style loot boxes and loot crates as gambling, okay? Now, before I say anything else, I'd like to know what you guys think about that statement, before I go into anything at all. Also, Myron, I appreciate the idea, but I mean, if you look down there, the website's there, and it's on every single YouTube video, and on both YouTube pages. I already spam it just a little bit too much, so... Just reading things over here. I agree. Loot boxes are one of the worst things to happen to gaming. I actually do agree with that sentiment. I think it's disgusting and horrible, but I'm not going to get into that. That's more opinion. So, let's talk about the difference between reality and legality, okay? So, let's stay in reality zone for a second here. Here we are, reality zone. Investment, you know, stock market, that kind of a thing, or investing into a company, that is gambling. Gotcha, you know, sort of thing, like the actual original Mercado Gotcha or whatever the hell it's called, and, you know, Pachinko, that's gambling. Loot boxes, obviously, gambling. What else? You know, all these things are fairly clearly and distinctly, obviously gambling, right? And it's easy to understand why it is. You know, you're playing down this, you're putting down real money in the hope of getting some kind of reward out of it. I mean, the base definition of gambling clearly and easily applies, does it not? Now, I would also argue that gambling depends a little bit on intent as well. Because Progue, this is funny, Progue, you bring this up, because one of the things that's been brought up many times when it comes to the definition of gambling is buying booster packs. Like in Hearthstone, digitally, or in Magic the Gathering, physically. That also applies to Pokemon and Dominion and all sorts of other card games like that. So, whether that is defined as gambling or not literally depends on how and on your intent going into it. What I mean by that is some people will buy a whole bunch of packs of cards hoping to get X card or X cards. That's gambling. Someone will sit down and say, I'd really like some more cards to kind of make a new deck. Or I just want some more cards to see what I get. That's not gambling. Intent matters as well. Let me give you another example of this. And I know this is really stretching it, but this is getting into my opinion range. Let's say my mother, Lore Mum, who enjoys gambling, goes to the poker slots and plays for an hour and then leaves, okay? Now, she goes there to have an hour having fun playing poker. She does not go there with the intent and explicit purpose of winning or trying to pull something out of it more than she put into it. She goes there with X amount of money, and if she runs out, she leaves. And obviously she doesn't run out of money. She's got plenty of other money. But you get my point, right? If she goes down below the point, or to the point at which she has set herself to, she's done and she leaves. Usually that doesn't happen because of the nature of how gambling is set up. So usually it just kind of does this for a while and then she leaves. I would argue that is not gambling in reality life, okay, in reality zone. I fully agree that that does get a little bit debatable, but that's the whole point. Let's talk about legality. Now, legality is a whole other ball of wax. It always has been. I've talked about this so many times in my show and in real life. It's easy to prove or to define or to state something in reality, but when it gets to legality, all of a sudden there's all these requirements and litigations you have to go through in order to say, this is such and such. So, for those of you not aware, I've actually followed the legal side of gambling for a while because I find it fascinating from a historical perspective. The realities of how different cultures and different societies over the last several centuries have approached legal gambling and how to monetize it or how to not monetize it or how to try to define it and what's required to do it, all sorts of fun stuff like that, right? The bottom line here is there's a fairly strict definition legally to what is defined as legally gambling. For example, legally, my mom going out to play slots, that is legally gambling, even though I would make the argument it is not in reality gambling. And then thus, by contrast, legally speaking, these, the MTG stuff and all that is not gambling, but in reality it could be argued to be gambling. Now you might be like, why are you bringing this all up, Lore? What's the point? The point is, the moment... Yeah, penny slots can go burn. The moment you bring the legality into it, you bring legislation into it. And the moment you bring legislation into it, you bring lawmakers and general government types in suits who have no idea what they're doing. This is where we get to sticky ground. And this is one of the reasons why I personally am actually really, really grateful that the ESRB did not decide to classify these loot box things as legalized gambling, because there are only really two possibilities if that were to come to pass, generally speaking. One is that the gaming industry would suffer a rather severe crash as people immediately try to pull out of an entire subsect of things that has been slowly growing over the last 5 years at this point, since 2012. Or, and I looked into this recently, or... they would do with video games what they have already done with casinos. And what's the old saying? Government would move in and ruin everything, right? I mean, maybe this is just me. This is my opinion. I'll freely admit this is getting into opinion. But I don't think having more government oversight and more government legislation around video games is a good thing. I really don't. I think every time the government has tried to step in and legally do something with regards to video gaming as a concept or a medium or an industry, it's gone to hell. Or it's been bad. Or it's been not good. I've never seen a positive outcome of that. I'm one of those people who actually doesn't even agree with the very concept of the ESRB. And yeah, I'm willing to admit that. Now, obviously, I actually had a whole topic here prepared. I even did some prep work and some research this morning to try and figure out what the hell's going on with regards to the loot boxes and the psychology involved in that. The gambler's fallacy, the sunk cost fallacy, the way in which they try to encourage people. I got an example for you right now. There's a game out there called Record Keeper. This is probably one of the best examples I can think of right off the top of my head. And in Record Keeper, if you go ahead and buy one of those boxes and open up, there's this whole, oh my god, Moogles and flashing lights and colorful sprays. It's a casino thing all over again. I mean, you ever wonder why casinos are all bright and flashy and colorful and reward and act like they're rewarding you for every little dinky thing they do? It's because that's trying to appeal to a certain sect or subsect of human psychology. The idea that, hey, you did it! The enthusiasm, the energy of it. You know, there are dozens of things. I could actually sit here and talk for literally all day about the psychology of how companies do what I would usually refer to as predatory practices in order to try and convince people to buy their thing. You know, the idea of, for example, you can buy... yeah, God, I'm going to make up numbers here. I don't want to call out any specific thing, but, you know, I want to pull... I need 500 in-game currency to buy... a counter thing. Okay, I'm just going to make stuff up here. 500 in-game currency thing, but you can't buy it in increments that are equally divisible of 500. You can buy it in 600 increments, or you can buy it in 700 increments, but no matter what, you're going to have some left over. And so rather than just saying, I will charge you $3 for this item, I am saying I'm going to charge you $3 for 700 currency, and 500 currency will buy you this item. This is actually a psychological trap as well as an economic one, because most people don't have the basic functionality of understanding the investment and the math involved. I'm sorry, I'm losing my words, forgive me. So, you know, that's one of, like, the 30 things they do to try and catch you, in addition to in addition to the idea that a lot of sites will post percentages, right? This is actually legally required in some countries. They'll say, you know, you have a 20% chance of getting this, and a 5% chance of getting this, and a 1% chance of getting the coin. I'm just picking stuff off my desk here, but, you know, right? So you look, and they show you this, so you know the odds, and it's like, aha, you know, I just have to get this thing, right? I just have to get this 1% chance, or this 3% chance, or whatever. And that goes into the gambler's fallacy. For those of you not aware, the gambler's fallacy is the idea that past trials determine future trials. In other words, let me put it to you very, very simply. Let's say you have a 1 in 10 chance of getting this stupid thing, right? So a lot of people will say, okay, well, I'll go ahead and gamble 10 times to get this. But that's not how that works. Statistical analysis, I mean, there's a whole class about this. Statistical analysis doesn't actually work like that. Each time, yeah, as Gelade was pointing out, each time you have a 1 in 10 chance. There's no cumulative odds here, okay? It's just roll the dice, roll the dice, roll the dice, and you do have a 1 in 10 chance of happening that 10 times. And we could do the math on that, but you get the idea. However, some companies will actually get more insidious about this, because some companies have luck protection, right? Thing is, that luck protection itself is just another layer of all this bull crap, because what it means is you do 5 pulls and you have a guarantee of getting a 4-star. Right? Or you have a higher chance of getting a 5-star, you know, something like that, right? So all you have to do is you have to guarantee, I just need to keep doing it, and eventually I'll get to the point where I get that luck protection. But the luck protection itself is another roll. Because, they don't phrase it as this, because what they say is you're guaranteed to get a 4-star. You're guaranteed to get a 5-star. You're not guaranteed to get one you want. You're not guaranteed to get one that's relevant, or one that you don't have a duplicate of. It's another damn roll. And some places will try to catch, let's just call it as bluntly as we possibly can here, whales with this by encouraging them to drop the 10, because at that point you're basically gambling 10 times, this is all made up numbers, gambling 10 times to get a draw. 10 times for 1 draw on a 4-star, right? And then you know they do another 10 times to get 1 draw on a 4-star, and then another 10 times to get another draw on another 4-star. That's some insidious crap when you think about it. And most people, if you sit back and you look at it, we can understand this. You know, this is not a hard concept to explain. This isn't getting into, you know, recursive algorithms. This isn't getting into some quantum crap, right? But most people don't think about that. Most people are just kind of scrolling on their phone. This is most prolific in the phone market, so forgive me for making fun of mobile games. But, you know, you scroll on the phone, it's like, okay, I got $10 to burn, right on. Oh, that's another thing they do. They use a form of what I call A to Z theory. For those of you who haven't seen my stuff, A to Z is when you go from A hero, to Z, a villain. The whole point of the theory is that B from A doesn't look all that unreasonable. And C from B doesn't look all that unreasonable. And each step is only 1 step removed, so it seems reasonable from where you're at the time, and you kind of slowly descend down the line. They do this too. It's hard to properly explain this one, but it boils down to, you know, $1 for a pull. That's not much money. $1 for a pull. That's not much money. $1 for a pull. That's not much money. Oh, there's a sale up if I pull 3 pulls now. Well, I mean, I've already put $5 into this, right? Okay. Put a 3 in this time. I got something pretty good. Not quite what I wanted, but it was pretty good. I'll put in another $3. And you can see, and it's so goddamn insidious, you can actually see how reasonable it seems when you're in that perspective, when you're at C and looking at D, right? If you pull yourself out of it and you look at it, it's like, what are you doing? It's disgusting. But, I would strongly argue that what we do not need here is more government oversight involved in this crap. All that's going to do is add a lot of red tape and more people who have to take money in order to make the same things that are already happening happen. And you know where those savings will be passed on to? Us. Because it will become more expensive to make video games, in general. It will not remove loot crates, that's the problem. Government getting involved will not remove the loot crate system. It will not destroy the in-game gambling things, because there will always be at least a few companies who still get some kind of return on it. And as long as a few companies get returned on it, other companies are going to say, well, I want part of that too. And even if they bowed out of it, they will then get involved in it. The sad, harsh, blunt, flat reality of this is a very easy thing to stop. It's the easiest thing to stop in the frickin' world. All we have to do is not buy them. That's it. That's it. It's legitimately that simple. It is legitimately that simple. I actually talked about this like last week, I want to say. We talked about this while I was streaming Shadow of War. Shadow of War is a great game. I recommend you buy it. I really do. It's a great game. Don't buy the DLCs. Don't buy the microtransactions. Don't buy the loot boxes. Just don't. It really legitimately is that simple. I spent a whole Loreweek section talking about how there are entire groups of people whose job it is to track that kind of thing. To follow that kind of thing. To sit down... I'm sorry, I keep calling it DLCs. I mean microtransactions. I tend to loop them all into the same category. Forgive me. Microtransactions, whatever. Loot boxes. I don't agree with that, Larian. I think that mentality right there, which Larian said, is most of the problem. I think there are too many people out there. You know, there's plenty of people. In fact, I imagine most people in chat haven't spent all that much on a loot box. Or at all. Let me think for a second. No, I have not spent 1 penny on a loot box ever. In any game, mobile or PC. But I imagine there's quite a few of them like that. But what about the people who are on the fence? Because there's really 3 general categories of consumers when it comes to this market. There's the people who never will. There's the people who always will. Those people can't do it. Can't do anything about those 2 groups of people. Nothing. We're not going to buy them, and they're always going to buy them. And that means, as long as enough people are in the always group, there's a chance that market will still exist. And that is something we have to accept. We cannot stop that. All we can do is limit its effect on us. And that gets into the middle group. The people on the fence, exactly, the people on the fence. Now, that's the people I want to talk to. That's the people we need to reach out to. That's the people who need to be convinced of the reality of this. Those people need to understand that this is a bad practice, or to understand the realities of why it is a bad practice. It's not enough to tell someone this is wrong. I've thought this since I was a child. You don't walk up to someone and say, don't do that, it's wrong. No. You explain. You explain why it's wrong. You say, this is why this is not a good practice. You say, this is why this is a predatory business concept. You say, this is why they're trying to take advantage of you. And again, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it to this specific concept. So you walk to a reasonable person. You talk up to just about any person, and they will understand what you're talking about. Because it's not that complicated. It isn't that big of a deal. Let me give you another one, just really quick. Let's say there's a game you're playing, And it has... Let's use Fire Emblem Heroes, because I've actually played that briefly, and then I put it down and then uninstalled it. Let's say you're playing Fire Emblem Heroes, and you really want... Crom, okay? You don't care which star you get of Crom. You just want Crom, because you can rank up the stars yourself, right? Now, as is, your only option is to burn currency on a loot box as a chance to get that. I have a legitimate question for you guys, and I know that there's going to be a lot of knee-jerk reaction on this, and that's okay, I understand. But I want a legitimate answer on this. What if, in place of the loot box garbage, we instead had, you can spend X money to get exactly what you want? You can just pay to get Crom, to use the example. You're playing Record Keeper, you really want, I don't know, Balthier. You can just drop $2 and buy Balthier. It is not as profitable. That is absolutely true. It is more profitable to trick people. Hello to Italy. I mention this because I'm actually surprised at how many no's I'm seeing in chat here. I have seen a lot of people who have had absolutely no problem with doing exactly that. With the system of, I would like to get such and such. I pay for such and such, I get such and such. At that point, it actually stops being a loot box. That's actually the entire point. It becomes DLC or a microtransaction. And that's why I need to be more specific about my terminology, because there really is a huge gulf of difference, in my opinion, between a microtransaction and a loot box. Loot box is garbage. There's literally nothing positive I could say about a loot box. But being able to pay for this... Now, let me give you a direct example of what I'm talking about. There's a game called Star Trek Online. It is, in my opinion, one of the best free-to-play MMOs that has ever been made. And I mean that with total sincerity, and I don't just mean that because it's Star Trek. I mean its business model. Star Trek Online does regular content updates all the time. New story, new effects, new dungeons, you know, stuff you can do. And it does that to keep its MMO players playing. Logical. It also tries to pull you into investing. I don't just mean investing money, by the way. I mean investing into the game, being invested, caring about your particular Romulan or your Federation character, whatever, by allowing you to do tons and tons of customization, or getting in-game accolades with the guild system, all that stuff. You know, the usual stuff most MMOs do. Now, if you want a Defiant class destroyer, you buy a Defiant class destroyer. And you can see how this is kind of a different mentality, right? If I really want a Defiant, I go buy one. Now, STO is not completely immune to the loot boxes thing, because anybody who's actually played the game knows STO actually does have loot boxes. Now, I've never touched STO's loot boxes, and I never will. I'm morally and ethically opposed to the concept of loot boxes. I'm sorry, I just am. That's my opinion. But if I wanted to go buy, right now, one of the pilot ships, I can do that. If I wanted to get a Burrell, I can do that. If I wanted to get a Dederadex fleet version, I can do that. To me, that is better, especially since STO is a free-to-play game. You know, I have actually spent money on STO, legitimately. I have actually done that. I have not paid for any loot boxes, but I have spent money on buying a few ships because I like the game and I've been playing it for years. Right? Anyways, I'm getting a little off topic. Excuse me. Also, there's other things, too, that I'm not going to get into. There's so many things. I could literally go down a list of all the things psychologically that companies do to try and get you to buy loot boxes, because it's a little insane, really, the psychology involved. So, SJ brings up a topic I see a lot from the seedier sides of the internet. Not you guys are cool. But, you know, the screaming, ranting forums. And I mentioned this because this is directly relevant. That's why I was going with this. This is directly relevant because it's a game that came out called Shadow of War last week, excuse me. And a lot of people have looked at Shadow of War and said, "Wah, wah," and have banned the game, and have boycotted the game, and have boycotted the company, and have boycotted the developers, and have blah, 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 blah. Now, if you want to do that, that is, of course, as ever, your choice and your decision. That is a case-by-case thing. I cannot lay down some kind of law that says in all cases you should boycott, or in all cases you shouldn't boycott. That's not how that works. But I want to stress really, really hard that the whole loot crate thing is obviously something tacked on to Shadow of War. You can play Shadow of War, and there is literally an option when you start up the game to disable online mode, to literally just not be physically capable of buying loot boxes and just play the game normally. And having just played through the game, not on easy, I can say rather definitively that you don't actually need loot boxes, nor is the game balanced or designed around them. So I would argue, in this case, that you should go ahead and buy the game and not touch the microtransactions. Now, some people would argue against that, and I understand that. And I feel like I'm making my point again here. I just feel like I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry. But again, there are people who will be paying attention to the ledgers, right? There will be people who are looking at them and be like, I actually have no idea, Adam Sweeta. I mean, I beat the game in like 3 days. So I don't think they had a chance to patch while I was playing the game. It is worth noting, though, that I did turn on online mode just to see how spammy it was, and it wasn't. I mean, occasionally I was like, hey, there's a new online mission, but that was it. No in-game ads, no nothing. It is not intrusive. And again, this is why I say this has to be a case-by-case scenario. We have to look at this individually. Because, I'm going to go ahead and play devil's advocate for a second, okay? Let's go ahead and say that... how am I putting this? I had a whole discussion about pushing the bubble, right? You remember me talking about that? A whole discussion on Loreweek about pushing the bubble. And I was talking about that with regards to Bethesda and the Creation Club and where they're going with that. Yeah, Forza. Ugh. Thing is, let's look at Shadow of War, okay? Let's use specific examples, okay? Shadow of War, in my opinion, does not push the bubble. Hey, we added these stupid loot boxes. Don't buy them. The game's fine without them. You can literally ignore them. We're good, okay? Let's say we're playing a game like Forza 7, which I believe I also recently talked about. I think it was just last week, actually. Forza 7 insidiously pushes the loot boxes on you. Should you, in that case, actually decline to buy the game entirely? Much more likely answer there. Because what we need to do, and I really hate to re-stress this part, but this is a capitalist economy. This is how this works. People do not make things. I know we all have our own preconceptions, but in reality land, companies will not keep making things if they keep not being profitable. Companies will self-destruct if that happens and get eaten by other companies who may try to do unprofitable things. And you know what? Let's not even get into that mess. Let's just move on. The point being, let's say Shadow of War 2 comes out, okay? And it really pushes the loot boxes. In that case, I would say don't buy the damn game. Because at that point, the game is unacceptable. At that point, the game is a problem, right? So don't buy the game. You with me so far? Now, they will notice the reduced sales of the game. So what they will probably do is pull back on the whole loot boxes thing. Now, let's stay in reality land for a second here. This is going to get a little cynical. Forgive me. We're probably not going to get rid of loot boxes. The simple reality is it's too easy to do it. You know how much time and effort it takes to make a single, well-designed boss in a game? Think about it. Even when you already have all the pre-stuff set up in advance, it takes days upon days of people working and testing and designing and redesigning, changing their mind about this. Okay, this animation doesn't work. Hang on, we found a bug. We gotta fix that. That's how much time and effort it takes to make one boss in a game. You know how much time and effort it takes to make loot boxes in a game? And that's the problem. Because a capitalist economy is all about gain versus cost. I know that sounds super duper simple, but that's because it is. I mean, I've studied economics my entire life, but it all really boils down to that one tiny little thing. Cost, reward. So, we're probably not going to get rid of loot boxes, because it just doesn't take anything to do them. The most time and money that is spent on designing loot boxes is designing those stupid animations that play when they open. And even that is not actually nearly as time-consuming or much of a problem as anything else involved in making the actual game. I mentioned Record Keeper earlier. You know, there were some designers, some graphics artists, and some animators, and some sound designers who sat down to make that animation, and that probably took them a little bit of time. But that's it. Someone sitting down with a spreadsheet and doing base statistical math to actually figure out what the loot boxes get and the formulas for how they open, that's nothing. That's a joke. One person can do that in a couple of hours at the most. Then you have someone design the appearance of the box, someone designed the layout to make it look nice and fancy, and oh my god, you really want to get this one that costs $100. And then, done. Loot boxes are simply too cheap and easy to implement. So, in reality land, we don't have to really concern ourselves with the question of whether or not we can get rid of loot boxes. All we can do is push back against the bubble. Because if we ever get to the point where loot boxes are... how do I put this? If we ever get to the point where what's happening in Forza 7 is the norm, we have not pushed back enough. What we have in Shadow of War is probably about the line that we're going to be able to accomplish as consumers. Pushing back enough so that the game is not impacted by this garbage. And they're not going to get rid of the loot boxes. Again, it's just too easy to implement. Even if they only make a tiny amount of money from that, it's probably going to cover the cost that went into it. All we need to do is keep pushing back against this kind of thing. So, for example, I will not be buying Forza 7. I will not be buying whatever, the NBA game that came out recently. And I think we should, in general, as an aggregate, as gamers, push back against the bubble on this. You know? Now, the problem is how you judge that kind of a thing. And that requires time and effort. And I acknowledge that that's a whole thing. We'll see. We'll see. I suppose we'll have to see when we get it. For example, I've already bought Call of Duty World War II, and I've heard rumors about microtransactions in it. I haven't heard anything concrete. And then, of course, there's the Battlefront thing, Battlefront 2, which a lot of people really want me to play through. Which, I mean, you guys requested it, so I kind of have to buy that game. I will be doing the campaign, and then that's it, because I have no interest in the multiplayer. But we'll see how bad that is. So I'm breaking my own word in several cases, but let me just say bluntly that if it was not for the show, I wouldn't be. I'm not reaffixing blame, I'm just stating. I understand there's plenty of interest in seeing the campaign for Battlefront 2. I'm even interested in it, especially if it's actually canon. Now, who wants to talk about stupid political bullcrap? Actually, I suppose this would be bureaucratic. Excuse me. Let me use my correct terminology. Who wants to talk about stupid bureaucratic bullcrap? Anybody? Let's talk about the SNES Classic. I have been asked the question, and I've brought up the shortages of the SNES Classic, God, at least 5 times now. Not counting now, so like 6 times now on Loreweek. Now, I think I finally have an answer. I think I legitimately finally have an answer for why we've been having SNES Classic shortages. Other than, you know, predatory scalpers. That's obvious. Let's talk about World War II. For those of you not aware, Japan was on the other side of the fence from us when it came to World War II. And they lost. And they lost so hard and so badly that their entire culture suffered an entire revamp. I forget the proper terminology for it. There's a term for this. I just looked this up a few days ago. There's a term for it, you know, the new Renaissance, the new Japan. And the idea that they had to kind of completely reinvent a huge amount of their very culture in the wake of that and completely return over from a militaristic expansionist empire into a massive economic superpower is what they did. Now, one of the things that happened as a result of this is that several gentlemen's agreements were made between some of the major companies that still existed at that point in time, who survived World War II. Now, these major companies, I swear I'm getting to the SNES Classic, you just gotta be patient with me. Several of these companies basically made something that I would actually agree with completely, as weird as this may sound. Because the idea was that Japan was such a wreck, economically speaking. I don't know how many of you have studied the economic state of Japan post-World War II, but it was a mess. And so some of these companies basically said, I'm going to work with you. You're going to be my provider in this. You get my business. Even if it's not profitable for me, even if I can make more money going to the other guy, you get my business as long as you keep providing this to me. We're going to agree to this so that they didn't self-destruct. And this actually was a very smart thing for them to do, legitimately, from an economical perspective. Because if they hadn't done this, what you would have seen is a lot of backbiting and shark fighting, and generally the kind of stuff that a newborn capitalist society always has, and always has had in terms of history. And so it probably would have there would have been no strong economic understructure. But instead, they did this. So even though some people lost money, even though some companies were going into the red, they kept doing business with each other. So business kept being done with them, which meant other businesses could do businesses with other businesses. And it literally did just form like this understructure here, this baseline, so that other companies could actually function and thrive. So overall, a good thing for the development of post-World War II Japan. Nintendo was involved in this. Nintendo did have several deals with this, and this led to certain manufacturing issues. Now, the funny thing is, whether or not this is an issue or not depends entirely upon what is effectively random chance. Because several of those people who provide, most notably circuitry and chips, as well as the plastic and the wiring for Nintendo products, those people don't just do business with Nintendo, they do business with plenty of other people. I actually brought this up when Mike was a guest here from Dark Pixel. That same company does business with Apple, among other companies. So if they have any kind of issue, Nintendo still is under this gentleman's agreement to keep doing business with them, right? Now, all of this is fact. We've covered fact. Obviously, now I'm going to get into conjecture, because I can name 3 major points in Nintendo's history in which getting a hold of product from Nintendo here in the States was actually pretty difficult to do. There was actually legitimate shortages coming through as a consequence of this agreement that we just covered. One of those is obviously the SNES and the NES Classics, and actually the Switch as well. Basically, every major Nintendo product coming out right now is suffering from that same issue because of this. That again, well established. The Wii. This thing right here. Anyone remember the Wii? I'm legitimately curious. How many of you remember how hard it was to get a hold of a Wii? Because it was pretty hard. There were mass shortages of the Wii when that thing came out. Didn't sell that well, not compared to other systems. They just didn't have the supply. They literally, physically didn't have the supply because they were still bound by this agreement. Yeah, me and Gary went on a literal, like a 50 by 50 mile grid search to get a Wii. We did actually, it's actually literally the Wii that's sitting right here. This is the Wii that Gary and I got. Yeah. Now I got a really fun one for you. Now, I'll admit, the moment I saw this was actually on a news bit. I trawl the news sites very regularly to try and see if there's anything interesting. The moment I saw this, I was like, oh my god, I remember that. And I went back and started doing some research, and that led me to where we are now. Anyone remember Super Mario Bros. 2? The year Super Mario Bros. 2 came out, there were significant shortages of all Nintendo products, especially and including the games. Yes, on the NES. I'm referring to the Doki Doki Panic one. In other words, the real Super Mario Bros. 2, just to make that abundantly clear. Not Super Mario Lost Levels. And so if you look back at that, and if you look at the production, they had the exact same problem. People were running out all over the place. People were just like, oh, we can't get a hold of Mario Brothers 2. We can't get a hold of oh god, I can't think of the name of the game. It starts with it's Zanzibar or something like that. There was a bunch of NES games that were really, really hard to get a hold of in that year because they were having this shortage issue because of the exact same thing I was just talking about. They even admitted this flat out. You know what's funny though? You go back, you read all the news reports, you watch the advertisements, you read the articles from back then, and this old thing. They used to have this thing called the newspaper. I don't know if you ever heard of it, and all of them say the same damn thing. It's the exact same stuff, almost word for word in some cases, that people have been saying over the last year about the NES Classic and the SNES Classic. Is this just a ploy? Is this because a toy company doesn't know how to make an electronic product? Is this them trying to drive up demand? All the exact same stuff was said. Now, there's actually been a few other points in history in which Nintendo has had shortages issues. When the Game Boy first came out is another one, although most people probably didn't even know that one because the Game Boy was actually kind of expensive when it first came out. But yeah, this is why we're having SNES Classic shortages, in my opinion. And I got to put it that way because, like I said, everything I said earlier was fact, but everything after that is conjecture. It is my opinion, based on the facts we have, that this is just another problem with the whole, oh, we got to use this provider. Now, that's funny in its own way. In its own way, because what's in this paper? Because I've actually insulted Nintendo corporate several times by saying they have dinosaur syndrome. If you don't know what that means, dinosaur syndrome is where you just plod stupidly forward, ignoring anything and everything that changes about your environment, and that's actually what Nintendo's been doing for many years, really. Nintendo corporate, I do have to re-stress that part. Yeah. Anyways, so arguably nothing new, but I wanted to touch on that because it's been something I've been asked of way too many times. No physical contracts that I could find to quit. If there are physical contracts, they are not a part of public record. Everything refers to gentlemen's agreements. Now, I have a very minor point to share with you guys. Just a quick news thing here. Probably should have mentioned this earlier. Mark Laidlaw quit EA. Any thoughts before I go into it? Mr. Laidlaw is arguably the only person of arguably the only person of BioWare left at EA who no longer works there. He quit just this last week, actually. It's been really hard to determine specifics. I actually have literally taken classes and given classes on trying to understand corporate speak. And I have read his official announcement. I've read the official announcement. I read other people's official announcements about it. This is my opinion, my interpretation based on how they word their phrases. But I think he quit. I don't think he was fired. I think he bowed out. Now, I mean, obviously, BioWare has functionally stopped existing years ago. This is not news. You know, I know we've literally talked about this just this last week about how BioWare doesn't exist anymore. I think it was yesterday, actually. And we've talked about this many times before. We talked about this before Mass Effect Andromeda even came out. There really isn't a BioWare anymore. There hasn't been. That's not how EA functions. There is this EA subdivision and this EA subdivision. And, but at the same time, development teams do actually matter, and there could be some, how do I put it, consumer trust in this. One of the things I've heard many times from many viewers and from many people in general on the internet is the idea that I have no more faith in Mass Effect, but I still hold out hope for Dragon Age. You know, the thoughts about Dragon Age 4 being this big thing. Now, I want you to take a step back, and I'm going to try really hard not to phrase this in a biased manner, but I want you to look at some facts we've learned over the last couple of months. So, the people involved at Dragon Age have flat out said what they're working on next is not Dragon Age 4. Now, the clarification about that was about, it's not the same thing like Dragon Age Inquisition was not Dragon Age 3, but whatever. So, we're not making Dragon Age 4. We're working on something new with the Dragon Age series, and Mark Laidlaw no longer works there. These are the 3 facts. Trying really, really hard not to shove my own bias into these. What do you think about this? What do you think about these 3 facts combined? And again, this has been just a couple of months between these 3 points. Forgive me, I've been having allergy issues lately. I admit, I'm still curious about Anthem. I haven't completely ruled it out yet, but I wouldn't call myself excited about it. No, the other Mark Laidlaw. Yes, there are 2 Mark Laidlaws. Seriously. I might be pronouncing it wrong. I'll put that on myself. Let me make sure. Hang on. Is there someone who pronounces this? No, not him. Hang on a second. Oh, excuse me. It's actually Mike Laidlaw. My bad. It's actually Mike Laidlaw. Sorry. That is on me. I even wrote down Mark. God damn it. Too many people. Mark and Mike Laidlaw. Seriously. One of them is the main guy behind Dragon Age, and one of them is the main guy behind Half-Life. Or was, in both cases now. Excuse me. So, Mike Laidlaw. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry. I suppose some people would add that David Guider is actually the main guy in Dragon Age. I suppose that's debatable. So I'll just accept that as a debatable. Anyways. I mean, I could give you my take on this, but really I think this speaks for itself. I think what we're seeing is just another company that's going to be producing whatever products is required of it. The same thing that EA has done for every other subdivision. In fact, if you follow history, the pattern is almost completely textbook. The pattern is completely fear at this point. Thank you, Velvedrix. Although thank you. Velvedrix is the only person I accept a regular sub by because she uniquely lacks any other method to give me money. The pattern of EA's process is almost textbook, and there's a lot of steps to it, but I'm just going to cover the main ones. So, buy a company. Okay, cool. Pump money into the next big title, and then ruin their next big title. Say, so Mass Effect 2, then Mass Effect 3. Try to effectively run it into the ground. That one stumbled with Inquisition. But then slowly push it into just being another group. See, EA has this thing where they buy up companies, turn them into little mini game factories, and then they buy IPs, and then they basically just dole out those IPs to their mini game factories, right? This is why EA has the rights to Star Wars games. This is everyone's like, why did EA get that? It's normal. This is how this works. Yeah, other examples: Bullfrog, Maxis, Microprose, Westwood. I feel like I'm still missing some. There's quite a few. So EA will do this. So buy a company, tons of money, failure, subdivision, Origin. Thank you, Darkrai, Origin. And then, now this is the weird part. This is the part where this has become, like, this is why I say this is textbook. Then a lot of the original developers who worked at Bullfrog or Maxis or Microprose or Origin or Pandemic or BioWare leave. They go off. They start their own new company with blackjack and hookers. And they go off and make stuff that sometimes is good and sometimes is not. And then the original company, what's left of them, just keeps doing this. Now, whether this is a conscious action or not, it's not something we have the capacity to properly judge, in response to Anthony's question. I would say yes, because as absolutely horrible as this sounds, this is a very, how do I put it? This is a very industry practice. EA is obviously not the only group that does that. What they tend to do, what several companies will do is exactly this kind of process. Look at something that's profitable, pull it in to cash in on the relative value of that profitability, that creativity, the quality of the product, okay? Then turn them into a factory, basically, for whatever product it is you're actually developing, while you spend more of your time and effort and money on the lawyers and the attorneys and the managers and the executives and the businessmen who are trying to get this IP or this licensing right or this, what's the term? Right to sell within an area. I forget what that's called. And this is something that just happens. This is something that a lot of companies do. And once you have these little factories making your product in this new region, or with this new IP, or with this new concept, you have reduced costs considerably because you're effectively spending more money on the IP, or the franchise, or the distribution rights, or whatever, or the licensing rights, than you are on actually making a good product. So you reduce costs here. This is why you make it a failure, by the way. You reduce costs here, pull it under your division, boom. This is actually a very normal industry practice. Very normal. And as Darkrai points out, EA gets a lot of attention for this because they're big and open and obvious, and they're a big fancy target. There are many, many other companies that do this. This is not really new. It actually amuses me how much EA has said, oh, we want to change our appearance. We want to change our perspective. We want to change how people think of us in the world. And then they keep doing the exact same thing they always have. And I'm not even laying blame here. I'm not even trying to cast judgments or anything. I'm just stating out things as neutrally as I'm capable of doing. This is just how it is. Capitalist economy. I swear so many of my Loreweeks turn into economic discussions. I apologize, guys. Now, Takoida said, why try to make them less profitable? There's several possible reasons for that, but the most basic one, the most basic possible reason to do that is to make them cheaper. Now, I don't know for absolute certainty, but I would say with high probability of certainty that BioWare would be a more expensive company to run than Subdivision X3A, or whatever the hell they're calling themselves now. I haven't actually been keeping track. Get rid of those high-name, high-value developers, pull down the market base a little bit, pull down expectations a little bit, work over here, boom. Let me put this to you another way. Would you rather have Five Guys or McDonald's? Now, I imagine some of you guys actually have no idea what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to get... This is a whole other topic I could really get into. But I'm just going to get to my point immediately rather than rambling on this topic. As much as I imagine most people would prefer a Five Guys burger to a McDonald's burger, way more people buy McDonald's burgers. They are relatively cheap. They are relatively easy and quick to acquire. They are relatively reliable. And they sell like crazy. That is fact. That is reality. I've eaten McDonald's burgers. Granted, there is literally no Five Guys around here, but point remains. Moving on. Well, I've already been talking for an hour. I've just been talking about economics all day. Let's talk about economics! No, I'm kidding. I'm done talking about economics, I swear. Let's talk about... let's talk about Kingdom Hearts, sort of. Now, I have a question for you guys. IGN buying Humble Bundle? I don't have anything to say about that yet. I meant to mention that earlier. I apologize. Really quick. IGN has bought Humble Bundle. There's nothing worth talking about there yet. If there is, I will talk about it. But right now, all we know is that IGN has purchased Humble Bundle. And there's literally not enough information to talk about. I can't discuss whether or not this was a aggressive merger. I can't discuss whether or not this was someone bowing out, like what happened with Google. I can't discuss whether or not this was a situation where Humble Bundle was in economic straits. I don't know. There's too little information. So, to be continued on that one. No, what I want to talk about is being coy. Fair enough, Anthony. I can't even argue that. And Lord knows they say to talk about what you know, so... let's talk about being coy. Now, I've actually found myself falling prey to this exact concept recently. Let's say you have a television show. Okay? Hear me out. And this television show is really interesting and really engaging, and it's got this deep underlying mystery, and it's got people engaged, and every now and again you peel back just another layer of the mystery episode by episode until the viewers are like, oh my god, I can't wait to see season 2. And then season 2 comes out, and then it's like, oh my god, it's this big mystery, and I'm gonna tease, hang on, we're gonna tease just a little bit less, and then, oh, this is all just a lie. Gotcha. You know, we were being coy. Or we were teasing. No actual revelations. Okay, this is... Then we get to season 3! Okay, no revelations here either. Oh, hang on, one big thing happened. Oh my god, viewer interest is back. Wait, it was all undone. Damn it. Okay. Season 4. I actually have a specific television show in mind when I'm doing this, by the way. Although I imagine most of you are thinking I'm referring to Lost, which also did this, but no, I am actually referring to X-Files. But this is a common thing, and I wanted to talk about this because I have heard a lot of different creators. I wanted to leave economics for a second and get into the creative mindset. I've heard a lot of creators argue about this exact concept, because it boils down to this. Some creators believe what you should do is build up, payoff, build up, payoff, build up, payoff. I lump myself in that one, by the way. Some creators believe you should do build up, delay, 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 delay. You notice I didn't say payoff. Now, I say that because I'm sorry, I'm being biased. I apologize. Let me say that again. Build up, payoff, payoff, or excuse me, build up, delay, 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 payoff. Now, I don't agree with that mindset at all personally, and that's why I had to check my words there. But some creators believe that you need to pull out that tension moment, basically the deep breath before the plunge, to quote Lord of the Rings, before "Pkong there," and it'll be so much more satisfying because you teased it out. Now, I don't like that as a creator or as a consumer. I don't like that from either perspective. But it is an interesting mindset to bring up, because it's not just... Again, I wanted to say this from a creative perspective, not an economic perspective. There are plenty of times where this is done from an economic perspective. We need... How many animes have had padding arcs whose only purpose was to buy them time for the manga to get caught up, right? How many times has there been a show that's like, oh god, we need to fill this season with something, or we need to stretch this out to another season because it's currently being profitable, so we need to do this. You know, leave the economics out of this just for this. Because there are still creators, from a purely creative perspective, from a purely creative decision, to try to deliberately tease up the hype as much as they can before paying it off. Now, it is my opinion that this is a thing that is possible to do. But in general, judging that moment of payoff is the problem. Because if you do build up, tease, payoff, that just sounds right, but how do you actually do that in television? You know, how many episodes? How much of how many episodes do you do teasing, right? How much time do you spend on that exactly? And of course, it is worth noting that this is going to vary based on individuals. Some people are going to be like, too long. Some individuals are going to be like, ah, too short. Some individuals are going to drink all the porridge. It's just terrible. So, it is my opinion, and so even ignoring the fact that I disagree with that mentality, it is my opinion that that is simply too risky to try and do on a regular basis. And yet it is amazing how many different works, both creatively and economically, do this exact process. Build up, tease, 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 flop. And I say it that way because, in my opinion, usually it just flops. Because you have teased it too long. Half-Life 3. Duke Nukem. Forever. FF15 was victim of this recently. If you spend a bagrillion years building... This is the same concept. This is the same philosophy. You spend a bagrillion years building up something, or not fulfilling something. Even when you finally conclude it, it's going to be less than satisfactory. So even if you don't tease anything, as Anthony is pointing out, eventually, when it comes out, it cannot live up to that hype. It's not even hype. I'm sorry. That's the wrong word. Forgive me. It cannot live up to the delay. Like, it's like, oh, just watch me. Here's the hype, okay? Yeah! And then it just plummets. That's what happens. Everyone's plummet area is different, but it always happens with everyone. Eventually, the hype deflates. Like a flan in a cupboard, to quote Eddie Izzard. So, this absolutely was the problem with Duke Nukem Forever. This absolutely was the problem with Half-Life 3, which will never be done at this point, because the problem comes with the time. Whether you're teasing it out or whether you're doing nothing is the same thing when it comes to the perspective of the hype from the individual. Because it both boil down to the same thing. You're waiting for the payoff. You're blue-ballsing, if you want to be crass about it. It's like, nope. Nope. And it gets to the point where you just get irritated. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Why is this taking so damn long? I mean, I could segue this into another topic about how people need to not tease things out too early, but the same point remains, right? No. Tease, nope. This was... I mentioned Kingdom Hearts, by the way, because this came up because Tetsuya Nomura recently said, hey, so there's this guy, Laurium, in Kingdom Hearts UX. Spoiler alert, by the way, sorry. Spoiler alert, in Kingdom Hearts UX, there's this guy named Laurium, which is an anagram for Marluxia, if you take the X out, which means he is probably, with like 99% certainty, Marluxia's somebody, okay? Tetsuya Nomura said, no, he's not. Different person. And that kind of crap just legitimately irritates me. Because let's really think about this. There's only two possible answers for why he said that. Answer one is because he's teasing. Gotta tease it up, right? And basically flat out lying to us. Nomura has done that before. Or he's teasing it out by trying to pull it technically. Because, I mean, a legitimate argument could be said that, for example, Lee and Axel are different people. So Laurium and Marluxia are different people. Or it's just a presentation of Laurium. Or it's a holographic representation of Laurium. Or it's the Book of Fate Laurium, or whatever. But it's still a technically. And so whether he is flat out lying to deceive us, or whether he is pulling it technically to try and deceive us, either way, he's doing the same damn thing. He's teasing it out, trying to build up that hype. And Bossiphus here says something that I really want to stress, because it is probably the biggest example of the flop, the build up, delay, flop I've ever heard. And that would be Star Trek Into Darkness. I'm about to spoil Star Trek Into Darkness In the off chance that you care, this is your big warning. Spoilers, 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 spoilers. So, when Benedict Cumberbatch, excuse me, was playing, God, I don't even remember his fake name. They were like, "Oh my God, it's fake, dude," and people were debating who it was, and several people, including me, were like, "Well, obviously it's Khan, but that's so obvious that can't possibly be the answer, right?" And they kept saying they flat out said he wasn't Khan. They flat out lied about that. And they kept being like, tease, tease, tease. Oh, you're going to be surprised by who this is. Oh my gosh. You'll have no idea who this is. And then in the movie, if you remember the scene, if you've seen it, the scene where he reveals, oh my gosh, he's Khan, is like way played up. Like it's this big, dramatic moment. And it flopped. It's like... you know what? I'm having trouble coming up with an analogy because that basically is the analogy I've used several years now. It's the Into Darkness thing. It's like, hey, build up, build up. Oh, it's the obvious thing. It's Khan. Sorry, guys. Flop. Don't do that crap. Even from a creative perspective, don't do that crap. Because, and this is why I related this to the delaying thing of Duke Nukem and Half-Life and all those other games, as well as the more televised thing, because this hits television a lot. It boils down to the same concept. If you build up the hype, whether deliberately or not, either because of delays or because you announced it too early or because you're teasing it up, you get to a point where you can't deliver. Hype will get to a certain point where no matter what you do, even if it is awesome, people are going to be like, that's it? Let me use a very much more controversial example. StarCraft 2. Now, I've gotten a lot of flack for really enjoying StarCraft 2. But what I want to talk about is the fact that StarCraft 2 came out, Wings of Liberty came out, and people were like, oh my gosh! Because that was, what, 12 years? It's some ridiculous amount of time. It was really long, from Brood War to StarCraft 2. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but, we all know what happened to Ghost. And so it suffered the same hype problem. It suffered from the exact same, the build-up, deflation problem. Now, I have known people personally and talked to people on the internet who in a more reasonable fashion have said their biggest problem with StarCraft 2 was the fact that it didn't live up to the hype. Those same people, almost to a number, when they finally went back and replayed the game with that expectation gone, found themselves enjoying the game, found themselves enjoying Wings of Liberty. But even for a game that was generally very high quality, even if you dislike the story, and that's your opinion, there's no denying that there was a huge amount of production value and a huge amount of quality that went in polish that went into Wings of Liberty. Even for a high-polished, high-value product, it still couldn't live up to the hype. Nothing could, and that's my point. Now, obviously, in some cases, you can't avoid the delay. FF15 is actually probably even a better example of this. I liked FF15 a lot, actually. I found it very enjoyable. I look forward to playing it again sometime in January when the rest of the DLCs are out for the lore run. But FF15 got a lot of flack and a lot of hate, and a fair portion of that was because of the fact that FF13 Versus was first announced in, like, God, 2009, I think? Some ridiculous amount of time ago. And people are like, and it took forever. And now, even looking at that reasonably, yeah, Breath of the Wild, I actually had the exact same reaction to Breath of the Wild. Thank God it was actually a really good game. Because, except for the damn thing. But yeah, what was I saying? FF15. Even though FF15 really is not the same game as FF Versus 13, that doesn't matter to us, does it? Like, if we want to be reasonable and we really want to sit and think and get our... Pretend this is a pipe, So I'm thinking, say, maybe... I'm thinking maybe if we look at this from the proper perspective, even if we try to use our brains, there's still going to be a part of us that looks at that and says, why'd this take so goddamn long? And the irony of it was FF15 was actually rushed. And we know that intellectually. But we, the consumers, were still waiting however many goddamn years for FF15 to come out. So it's not like... this isn't just a creative decision, admittedly, which is why I prefaced this whole thing with that whole thing. Sometimes this just happens. Sometimes there are production issues. Sometimes there's rights and development issues. This actually happened with the Hobbit trilogy. Here's another great example. I really, really like the Hobbit trilogy. I got a little flack for that one too. That's okay. I've painted the target. I like the Hobbit trilogy. Hit me. I've heard it all. But the Hobbit trilogy was a rushed production because it was delayed. It's so stupid how often I have to say that with regards to a fictional work. It was a rushed production because it was delayed. That's exactly what happened with the Hobbit trilogy. Because of rights issues. Because of licensing issues. It took forever to get the legality dealt with, and when they finally did, it's like, okay, you have 11 months to make a movie. And they're like, what? 11 months? It's like half the time that they had on the previous films. And then again...
Zug zug.
See you around, Solaris. And then again, FF15, exact same situation. They were building FF13 verses and building FF13 verses, and then they changed the engine. And then they changed primary developers. And then they changed the directors, and then they changed the writers. And at that point, shkonk, and now they have to push out FF15 in a hurry because we've been waiting too long for this. Someone had to clean up someone else's mess, and what we have is FF15. Or the Hobbit trilogy. Anyways, point being, ignoring all that, I just wanted to say that for the sake of reasonability. You know, obviously sometimes you just don't have the availability to do what you want to do. But, creatively speaking, removing economics, creatively speaking, I cannot stand it when companies, when people, when developers, when writers, when creators will, hang on, it's just... Let me just keep building this up and building this up. And, oh my god, I'm just going to be building it up forever. Anyways. Speaking of which, speaking of artificial hype, I don't want to do this, but it's been requested by many people. So I'm going to do it. I am going to do a thing. What's funny is I did this exact same thing with episode 7, now that I think about it. You know, this is probably going to be copyright struck as well. What do you want to bet? Maybe I should just mute it? That might be simpler. Let's just mute it. So here we go. Star Wars Episode 8 trailer came out last week. Monday, I want to say, something like that. I didn't actually watch it at first. I didn't want to. And then a lot of people requested I do an analysis of it, so now I have to do an analysis of it. Let me just go ahead and start by saying that one of the more common things that we see in Star Wars trailers, this happened last time too, is misdirection. There's a lot of deliberate misdirection when it comes to this stuff. Episode 7's trailer did a lot of misdirection by deliberately cutting things and splicing things in a way to try and lead you into a direction, lead you into thinking one thing or another. Probably the most interesting point, though, there's only one point that I really, really want to discuss, and that's this one right here. So we see a modified TIE interceptor there that Kylo Ren is piloting. He's coming on in some kind of thing. He's fighting in some kind of big space battle, right? Zoom. And then we go to this. Now, the implication here is so obvious that I don't even feel the need to share it. What I find interesting about this is this might act... Yes, I know, Dark Right. This might actually be one of the better examples of misdirection I've ever seen. And I say might because I don't know for certainty. But this might be an untwist because we see Leia there. Him, her, targeting, getting ready to fire. Oh my gosh. Is he going to kill his mother just like he killed his father? No, right? Now, the usual thing that a trailer would do would be to frame a scene exactly like this, and this is not actually what will happen. That is the norm. And in fact, I could argue, and I'm not going to, but that almost every other aspect of this entire trailer is nothing but misdirection, especially this part. If you'll give me a second. Right here. This part right here feels like massive misdirection there, right? So I think what they're doing, this is my opinion, is they have this whole trailer, and we know how they do things. Everyone knows they do this. And then they put one little nugget of truth in there. Now, this is actually really clever if it's true. I mean that with total sincerity. This would actually be really clever. Because if he actually is doing what it appears that he's doing here, most people will walk into the movie not thinking that, based on the trailer. They're like, oh yeah, whatever. And then if he actually does it, it'll catch us a little bit more by surprise than it otherwise would have. Just food for thought. Also, this guy, who for some reason the internet can't stop talking about, I don't remember his name and I don't care. He is very cute. I will freely give him that. But, you know how the internet is with cute things. Here, I'll play the sound just for this one section. There we go. Just had to play the sound for that one. He is very cute. I like him. But yeah, they keep doing things, and you could pay if you're paying attention at all. I'm not going to do a full analysis of this trailer. I don't really think it's a worthwhile thing to do. I do want to show a couple things, but you could see multiple scenes being spliced together, based on the background, based on the coloring, based on the lighting, like I mentioned earlier with regards to Rey and Kylo. Oh, damn it, I missed it again. It's only there for like half a second. There we go. So that's, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that's actually the supremacy there in the background. Wouldn't surprise me, Gallade. What do you guys think? Do you think that's actually the supremacy? The new super ridiculous Star Destroyer that's actually kind of ridiculous looking? There's another shot of it, maybe. And of course, there's I suddenly can't think of the name of it. Iceon? God, I don't remember its name. I'm just gonna go with Iceon. That's not its name. I can't think of it. Oh my god, I'm failing at Pokemon right now. Glaceon, that's it, Glaceon. I got it before you said it. And there's the not AT-ATs. Now that's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that the one torturing her here is in fact Snoke. Although what I find more interesting about this is that he looks different there. If you actually look at his physical appearance in Episode 7 versus here, it looks like he has, for lack of a better term, healed more. This could lend some credence to the idea that he was an old Sith or dark side user or whatever who has been regenerating. This is something that's been tossed around for a while about the regards of Sith, that he's some older player to the board, basically. Someone who we couldn't obviously expect because we didn't know he even existed, who has been slowly building himself up. Now, give me a moment. Just pay attention here. You can see how obvious it is if you really look at it. This might even be within a few minutes of each other, these two bits here. And you know what makes me sad? It makes me sad that this is probably misdirection. Because, you know, I was thinking about this recently, and they won't do this. They will play it safe, most likely, statistically speaking. I'm still going to see Episode 8. I've already got my tickets and everything. But I really would love to just take this story in a massive right turn here. Turn Rey to the dark side. Turn Kylo into the light side. Really have them diverge from each other. Just, I would love to see them really, really throw Star Wars on its head. But what's most likely going to happen here, let's just be completely honest, this is most likely going to be Empire Strikes Back 2. For good and for bad. Because, I mean, Empire Strikes Back is a really good game. Excuse me, movie. I did want to point out a couple things here really quick on the not Hoth planet that has the not 8080s. Now, I want to make this really clear. I don't agree with the common statement that Episode 7 is just A New Hope. I don't. There's no arguing this against me, because I've already seen this argued a dozen ways, and I've disagreed with all of them. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, what I will say about the trailer for Episode 8 is it feels like whoever put together the Episode 8 trailer very strongly wants us to think about Empire Strikes Back. There are several ways that they are being presented. There are several ways that they are showcasing scenes in a certain order, and only certain angles them. And they're doing this pretty much deliberately to, in my opinion, sorry, I gotta add that part. In my opinion, they're doing this to invoke a feeling of The Empire Strikes Back and trying to make us think of that. I hope to God, I really do, that this is also misdirection. That this movie is not, another Empire Strikes Back or anything like that. Obviously, it will thematically be an Empire Strikes Back because The Empire Strikes Back is a trope at this point in culture, in fictional consciousness. But you get my point. I don't think this will literally be an Empire Strikes Back 2.0. I think it'll just be the darker middle part of a trilogy. So, my opinion. And yeah, you can see, I'm sorry, I wanted to freeze this here. You can actually see both types of walkers here. In the background there, kind of towards the middle, bottom right-ish, you could see one of the smaller walkers against one of the mega walkers or super walkers or whatever the hell they call themselves. And of course, the shuttle ship there gives you a little bit of perspective on how large these things are. A couple other things I wanted to point out, just things that caught my eye. And yeah, I've seen... Okay, so hang on. People are asking me what I think about the fact that Mark Hamill has been not enjoying the direction of it. Now, I have tremendous respect for Mark Hamill as a voice actor. He is an extremely competent, prolific, fantastic voice actor. But first of all, and this... Darkrai got there before me. First of all, a lot of those stories have been, what's the word I want to use? Sensationalized. If you actually specifically read the interviews or watch the interviews, Hamill has not been particularly derogatory towards the new films. What it basically boils down to is the fact that he's not so sure about certain things, and that's it. I don't care. I mean, I'm sorry. I really hate to say that, but I just do not care if a particular actor doesn't get that, even if that was actually 100% true. But regardless, this is a situation that's been blown out of proportion. So we've got two different directions for me to not really have much to say about that other than rolling my eyes and moving on. Okay, so they keep talking about this massive power. Infinite power. This is the next thing I want to talk about. Let's talk about Rey Kenobi. Actually, fun fact, I've seen people speculating wildly over the last week about this, and most people seem to be in the two camps, either Rey Palpatine or Rey Kenobi. I'm curious what you guys think. If you remember, I actually said Rey Palpatine, I think like 2 years ago at this point. So, that'd be cool. But let's actually get down to really analyzing Star Wars as a work here. Because if we're going to talk about Rey, whatever her name is, we're going to have to talk about the interpretation of the Force. Now, for any of you who have actually seen my KOTOR lore run, you know that there is no true definition of the Force, or at least there hasn't been. Now, Darkrai, I'd love it for you to hop in on this one, because I haven't been going into the nitty-gritty of the AU, as you know. But it has been fairly... It seems like they're trying to codify things more in the AU. More coordination, more interaction, more everyone being on the same page than we ever had with the EU, with a few noteworthy exceptions. I mention that because we might actually have a codified definition of how exactly the Force friggin' works in the modern AU era. But I mention this because, damn, it's a goat. But thing is, Rey here, by most, if we're going by the movies, if we're just to ignore everything else, if we're going by just the 8 films so far, what we see is that the Force is inherited. It's familial, right? It goes down bloodlines. That doesn't make any damn sense to me, but I'm not the one writing the series. In the films, it's really, really made clear that, the Force is strong in my family. That part is grilled in over and over and over, and has been done so pretty much in all 8 films, right? That would mean, logically speaking, if they are continuing forward with that mentality, Rey has to be someone, yes, genetic, thank you. If Rey has to be someone of some kind of genetic bloodline that already has super strong, powerful Force, right? Ergo, she pretty much has to be the child of someone. Now, I'm not saying it has to be someone we know, just that it has to be someone. There's actually a recent Star Wars series of comics that's specifically covering some of the Jedi who survived the original purging, or of Order 66. But as Mandarton points out exactly the point I'm making here. We've only really covered the one bloodline. The bloodline of the Skywalker family, going back from Anakin down to Kylo, actually going down to Kylo Ren, who also has tremendous Force power that is untamed and unraw and blah, 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 Anakin Skywalker 2.0, right? So, now, I mention this because in Episode 7 it was made pretty clear that Rey has a lot of innate power, and that's the next thing I want to cover, while we're talking about the Force here. The idea that, as they're going with it, it seems pretty clear that the Force is something that you have basically an innate ability for, and then you have your skill in using. Now, that's relevant because that would mean that Rey would have the same vast untapped potential that Kylo did. In fact, if you remember from my Episode 7 discussion, that was one of the things I liked most about the presentation of Kylo Ren, the fact that he was so clearly powerful and yet had no idea how to use any of it. And that does appear, based on the trailer, to be how she is being presented, with all this massive raw power, and with Luke not really being sure how to deal with this, or if he should train her, blah, 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 and try to make her into more of a skilled individual. Talent and skill, yeah, exactly. And of course, it is very likely that in this film, from a purely narrative perspective, just based on narrative conventions, it's very likely that both Kylo and Rey, regardless of what's going on in their past and history, are going to be two people who are going to be increasing their skill to go along with their innate talent. God damn, I'm sorry, this one scene here is actually really powerful. I know a lot of people don't like Kylo Ren, but I like the actor's face. He does a lot of things with his expressions. Just watch his face here. Just a lot of great stuff there. Anyway, sorry, forgive me. I'm actually looking forward to this movie, but of course I am. It's a Star Wars film. Hang on. Cute. Okay, we're done. Now, that being said, I would really, really love it if they go in a direction where, for example, this guy right here, my man, Finn, who anyone remembers was my favorite character in the last film, really has more of a role in actually making this stuff happen. But that's probably not what's actually going to happen. Luke, based on how they're doing it, it seems likely that what they're doing with Luke is trying to turn him into the Yoda. Now, let me explain what I mean by that a little bit. I'm talking about the Yoda who... How do I put this? Yoda, even in the AU, Yoda went from, I am this great Grand Jedi Master to, oh, crap, gets owned by Palpatine, has his pride destroyed, and is humbled, okay? Shut up, Loser Oz. So, Yoda gets humbled, and then he makes a mistake. To be blunt as possible, he makes a mistake in the way he interacts with Luke and the way he tries to train Luke. I think that's the general direction they're going with Luke. Not that he's repeating Yoda's path, but he's repeating the general arc of that. The idea of someone who is this great and powerful, almighty Jedi Master who screwed up and who got owned, in this case by Kylo, most likely by Kylo, and by the betrayal at his old academy, and then humbled and now is making mistakes out of fear. Because in my opinion, the idea that the critical flaw of Yoda's character is his fear is a wonderful narrative thing. It's fantastic. It fits so perfectly. It's beautiful in my legitimate blunt opinion. So the idea of Luke over here going through the same thing. I mean, look at his expression there, for God's sakes. It makes a degree of sense. And it also, of course, would help to bring Luke down. Bring him down in power level, bring him down in relevance. In other words, from a writer's perspective, even though this is kind of repeating a story arc that's already been done in Star Wars, it makes sense to do so, because as a writer, you need to have a reason why Luke doesn't walk in and win. I mean, I hate to say that, but you do. You need to have a reason why Luke doesn't just walk in and win. This is always a problem writers tend to have when it comes to writing characters that are very powerful or very skilled. You need to make a way for them to not just solve the problems. So this would be an excellent way to bring Luke down to a point where his skill has ebbed because he's just been sitting on this frickin' island for forever, and his fear is preventing him from really doing anything he actually has to. And of course, it would make even more sense then for Luke to die, actually, because what would happen, narratively speaking, is you have the man who's like, no, I can't do it, and then he sees the error of his ways, but he's still not that skilled, and he's still being held back, so he walks back into the spotlight to do things and to fix things, but he's not actually at the relative power level that he was before, so he fails and he dies. And in this case, it would be different than, for example, Obi-Wan's death, because Obi-Wan was clearly a self-sacrifice. In this case, it would be Luke failing, utterly and completely failing. And, as Star Wars has proven, if you kill Luke Skywalker, he could still be in Episode 9. Just, yeah. Either way, this is all just random thoughts. I do want to mention one other thing. People who are better than me have analyzed lightsaber fighting styles and have pointed out that Rey's fight in Episode 7 and the way she handles her lightsaber here is pretty much the exact same lightsaber style that Palpatine used back in Episode 3. Make of that what you will. Just thought I'd share it. I am pretty excited about this film. That would be funny, Bregwin. Hey, Liam Neeson, we need you to do one line of dialogue. That'll be $30 million. I'm just thinking if there's anything else I have to share. I don't think there really is. There's plenty I'd love to do with this series. But, of course, I don't have creative reins. Which ones? Oh, the Rey Palpatine one. Yeah, I might literally go, yes! Actually, I'm going to take this moment to complain about first world problems. I can't see it. I can't see Episode 8 in the VIP theater. You know, the big comfy seats that I've been seeing every film in for the last, 2 years now. I literally can't. I'm physically incapable. You know why? Because they don't have any tickets for that aren't 3D. Oh, like they couldn't do that, Dakota. You've seen Return of the Jedi, right? Yes, Anthony, plenty. It's mostly books, I suppose, at this point. Subscribe to these things you can't see. But yeah, they literally don't have VIP tickets, so I'm going to be sitting in a normal theater with a normal seat with a normal 70 billion people there, because those 3D can go burn, as far as I'm concerned. And that's just me, never mind everyone else I'm going with who also does not want to see it in 3D. We did get the RTX, RBX, whatever the hell it is stuff. But this is the Empire version, Dakota. Anyways, I don't actually have anything else to share about that. That's the end of Loreweek. I'm leaving forever. I'm never coming back. Ugh, I impale myself in my pipe. I will be streaming some South Park for anybody who wants to see that in just a minute, as soon as I readjust a few things. Otherwise, I'll see you there.